I'm Elena, 30 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've kept our family's vineyard alive through drought, debt, and disease. I ran the harvests, dealt with suppliers, even nursed my mother back to health when doctors gave up. But last spring, during her second wedding, my brother raised a glass to family legacy and announced I'd been removed from the will. I was standing 3 feet away holding a tray of champagne. They expected me to smile. I didn't. I disappeared. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you worked hardest to protect, trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. When my brother clinked his wine glass and said, "The estate will carry on through those who truly understand the vision," I thought he was just playing host again, soaking in applause. Then he smiled sideways at me and added, "And the updated will reflect that." My stomach dropped. I was standing under the fairy lights of our family's vineyard courtyard, tray in hand, pouring drinks for guests celebrating my mother's second marriage, a ceremony I'd organized start to finish. The laughter around me didn't match what I was feeling. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I glanced toward my mother, hoping to catch her eye, but she avoided my gaze and leaned in to whisper something to Callie, my sister, who smirked and adjusted her champagne flute. I stood frozen, arm halfway extended with a bottle of our 2021 reserve, the wine I had personally blended and bottled, the one that had just won a regional gold medal. My face was calm, but inside I felt a burn I couldn't yet name. This wasn't an oversight. This was orchestrated. The past year had been brutal. Wildfires crept too close for comfort, and supply chains were a mess. I'd handled it all while Mom recovered from surgery, and Victor, her new husband, advised from the comfort of a distant beach house. Bryce had flown in maybe twice, once for a photo op, and once to fire a foreman he didn't like. Callie showed up in stilettos for vineyard tours she booked with influencers, calling herself the brand visionary. But I was the one who rose before sunrise to walk the fields, hands stained purple by harvest, lungs full of frost and fermentation. So when Bryce handed out sleek black folders to potential investors after the toast, I instinctively stepped forward, thinking I'd need to help explain the numbers. Instead, Callie slid in front of me and passed out the folders herself. "Don't worry," she said under her breath, smiling. "They don't need the vineyard girl tonight." I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I quietly walked back to the service tent and stared at the catering table I'd coordinated, the wine pairings I'd designed, the seating chart I'd agonized over. Not a single person, not even my mother, had stood up for me. The ink on the new will had probably dried weeks ago, hidden behind legal jargon and family dinner smiles. That night, after the last guest staggered to their car and the lights were dimmed, I stayed behind to box up leftover hors d'oeuvres while my siblings celebrated with the legal team on the balcony. No one noticed I hadn't joined them. No one said thank you. I loaded the van in the silence and drove home with dirt under my nails and betrayal stitched into my spine. They'd taken my labor, my loyalty, and my love, and cut me out without blinking. But I wasn't broken. I was awake, and something colder than anger started forming in my chest. I was 21 when my father died, and left the vineyard teetering on the edge of foreclosure. Bryce was already working in San Francisco, too busy with his tech startup to come home for more than a weekend. Callie had just dropped out of her second college, deciding she was going to find herself through yoga retreats and travel blogging. And my mother? She was in and out of hospitals with a kidney condition that left her too weak to manage payroll, let alone the land. I had 1 semester left in agricultural economics at UC Davis. I dropped out without telling anyone, packed up my dorm, and came back to Sonoma County. I told myself it would just be for a few months, That was almost a decade ago. The vineyard was already in trouble. Our irrigation system was ancient, the books a mess, and the winery owed more in back taxes than we had in equipment value. But I was too young and too stubborn to let it go under. I applied for emergency grants, negotiated with creditors, took extension courses online, and sold the silver jewelry my grandmother left me to hire one good foreman. I slept in the bottling room when the house was too cold to heat. Every bottle we sold that first year, I labeled by hand. I made payroll before I bought groceries. I weathered late frosts, drought warnings, labor shortages, and fires that forced us to evacuate the barn. When Mom's health deteriorated, I turned her bedroom into a care suite, learned to administer her medication, and hired nurses when I could afford them. During harvest, I ran from field to fermenter, from doctor appointments to payroll meetings. No one asked me to. No one thanked me either. Bryce returned occasionally, always with a girlfriend on his arm and big ideas about how to modernize the brand. He'd pose in front of the barrels and talk about blockchain wine sales. Callie would sweep through on weekends with branded dresses, trying to get influencers to tag us on Instagram. She once said I should smile more in pictures because I looked too intense for brand messaging. My mother, still recovering but alert enough to see what was happening, never pushed back. She said I was strong, that I didn't need affirmation like the others did. "You were born steady," she told me one night when I collapsed beside her bed after a 12-hour day. Not everyone has that gift. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. I didn't see it for what it was. A sentence. A role I'd been assigned without consent. Be the quiet one. The capable one. The one who keeps everything running while others get credit for ideas they didn't lift a finger to build. When Mom finally got better, I expected something to shift. I thought maybe she'd step back in and recognize what I'd held together. Instead, she grew distant, more entangled with Victor, the estate lawyer she met during her recovery. He was slick, charming, always smiling, and always reminding us of the importance of succession. Planning, I assumed I was part of that plan. When I brought it up once, gently, hesitantly, Mom just waved her hand and said, "Let your brother handle the future. You focus on what you're good at. Operations." That was the first time I felt something crack inside me. Not rage, not sadness. Just a quiet, disorienting realization. I wasn't part of the future. I was the labor keeping it running until someone else inherited the reward. And I kept telling myself it was okay. That family meant sacrifice. That one day they'd see. I was wrong. They didn't want to see. They never had. The night after the wedding, I didn't sleep. I sat at the end of my childhood bed, now barely used except for storing gift baskets and vineyard brochures, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like a ghost. My phone buzzed with texts from guests. "Beautiful ceremony. Your mother looked radiant. The wine was phenomenal." Not a single mention of me. I had become invisible in the very place I'd poured my life into. Around 2 a.m., a message popped up from a contact I hadn't seen in 5 years. Noah Kessler. Back when I first took over the vineyard, Noah had been an early investor. Quiet, strategic, a former sommelier who believed in what we were trying to build. He'd clashed with my family, particularly Bryce, over control and vision. When he raised questions about accounting discrepancies and mismanagement, they voted him out, accusing him of trying to hijack the brand. I didn't defend him publicly, though I'd always suspected he was right. At the time, I was too buried in damage control to pick fights. His message said only, "I saw the gala. I'm sorry. If you're ready to do something with that anger, I have an idea." I hesitated. Noah had moved on, launched his own label that was slowly gaining traction among boutique distributors. He had no reason to reach out. unless he'd seen the same injustice I felt. We met 2 days later in a quiet tasting room outside Healdsburg. He didn't ask how I was. He already knew. "You built that vineyard," he said, swirling a glass of his newest Syrah. "They just packaged it." I didn't respond. He leaned in. "Let's build something that can't be taken from you." "With what money?" I asked. "I've got access. You've got everything else." He proposed starting a new label, smaller, more experimental, rooted in regenerative practices and honest storytelling. But here was the key. No family name, no legacy strings, no ties to the estate. This would be ours. Mine. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. At that point, I wasn't thinking about making them pay. I was thinking about making myself real again. Outside of them. Beyond their definitions. We shook hands over a barrel table that still smelled like oak and lavender. The next morning, I resigned from the vineyard via email. No confrontation. No guilt-soaked farewell. Just a clean break. Callie sent a single-word response. "Seriously?" Bryce didn't bother replying. My mother forwarded it to Victor with the note, "Handle this." I didn't answer. Noah and I found a rundown plot on the outskirts of the valley, ignored by big players because the slope was tricky and the irrigation system needed overhaul. But I'd worked with worse, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't patching up someone else's dream. I was planting my own. We called it Ash Grove. The name came from a row of scorched trees on the property's edge, remnants from a wildfire years back that nearly gutted the land. Most winemakers saw it as a cursed slope. Noah and I saw it as a challenge. While Bryce polished tasting rooms and Callie brokered influencer deals back at the family estate, I was digging trenches to rework an irrigation system that hadn't functioned in a decade. I bartered with local tradesmen, repurposed leftover equipment, and partnered with a women-run agricultural co-op that lent us both hands and heart. What we lacked in money, we made up for in sweat and silence. I was up before dawn, my hands raw again, but for once, the ache felt clean. Every vine we planted was chosen for resilience, not prestige. Every label we sketched came from stories that were real, about land, labor, and survival. We didn't chase ratings, we chased depth. Slowly, bottles of Ash Grove began appearing at select boutique retailers. Some took notice. It wasn't flashy, but it lingered in memory. Meanwhile, I stayed invisible. No press interviews, no public appearances. When journalists asked about the lead vintner, Noah simply said, "A legacy grower with no interest in legacy." We kept my name off the paperwork, off the permits, even off the payroll records for the first year. The last thing I wanted was a breadcrumb trail leading back to Victor and his legal tricks. Bryce would have used it to claim ownership. Callie would have found a way to slap a hashtag on it. They couldn't imagine a world where I walked away to create something better. I let them think I was done. Let them believe I had burned out. Moved on. The illusion served me. Then came the Regional Wine Summit in Santa Barbara. A coveted expo that featured 10 up-and-coming brands alongside legacy estates. Ash Grove was selected by blind taste panel. The organizers had no idea who was behind it. But the family estate, now rebranded Vallis Lane, was also on the roster. Bryce posted a smug video days before the event. Excited to remind people who defines wine in this region. I watched it once, then closed the app. We prepped quietly. Noah oversaw logistics while I refined the notes on our Syrah Pinot hybrid. It wasn't traditional, but it told the truth about the land. When we arrived at the venue, Ash Grove's booth was set directly across from Vallis Lane. Bryce was surrounded by cameras. Callie wore a floor-length red gown like it was a red carpet. They didn't recognize me at first. I wore no badge, Just black slacks, a crisp shirt, hair tied back. Noah handed me a glass and murmured, "Ready?" I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I stepped forward into the crowd as if I'd always belonged there, because I had. Only now, the name didn't matter. The work spoke for itself. And the silence behind my presence? That was intentional. Let them wonder. Let them sweat. Let them see what unclaimed power actually looks like. It started with a question from a journalist. Midway through the summit, after a tasting that left half the panel in stunned silence, a reporter from California Vintner Review approached the Ash Grove booth. "Who's behind this blend?" she asked Noah. He gestured toward me without hesitation. "That's our lead vintner," he said. "Elena Mercer." The name hit the floor like a dropped glass. There was a ripple, then a wave. Conversations paused. People turned. Across the aisle, Bryce lowered his tasting notes. Callie's PR smile stiffened, her fingers twitching on her phone. I didn't move. I simply nodded, then turned back to pour a glass for a curious couple who had wandered over. A man in a gray suit leaned over from the Vallis Lane booth, whispering something urgently to Bryce. I watched my brother's face shift from confusion to disbelief, to something I hadn't seen since we were kids. Panic. A young producer for a regional food network ran up, her camera already recording. "Ms. Mercer, is it true you're the founder behind Ashgrove?" I answered calmly. "I'm one of them." "And that you used to run operations at Vallis Lane?" My pause was short but deliberate. "I built it, before the name changed." Her eyebrows rose. "Will you be speaking at the closing panel?" "No," I said. "My work speaks for itself." And it had. Our booth was swarmed. Distributors asked about contracts. Sommeliers requested back labels. A Michelin-starred chef left a handwritten note asking to feature our 2022 blend exclusively. Meanwhile, at Vallis Lane, Bryce's voice grew louder with each conversation. I heard fragments, words like coincidence and unauthorized and we weren't aware. Callie was typing furiously, probably composing a post to spin it. But it was too late. By then, screenshots had already circulated. A side-by-side of my name on Ashgrove's tasting card and a photo of me standing silently behind Bryce at last year's Harvest Press event. The caption read, "The woman behind the curtain now takes center stage." My mother wasn't at the summit, but Victor was. He made his way to our booth near the end of the day, his tone sharp and legalistic. "This is inappropriate," he said. "You're still associated with the family estate. You need to clarify." "I'm not associated," I interrupted, loud enough for the nearby press to hear. "I resigned. Last year. I have the email." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the cameras were rolling. He stepped back and adjusted his blazer. "We'll be in touch." I looked him in the eye. "I won't." That night, Ashgrove was listed among the summit's top 3 emerging labels. The write-up read, "Built not on legacy, but on grit and clarity." Bryce and Callie left early. Their booth was half empty by closing time. But ours? Ours stayed full until the lights dimmed, and in every glass poured, every nod from a buyer, I felt it, the turning. Not vengeance, just visibility. And that was enough. 2 days after the summit, my mother called. The voicemail was calm, almost rehearsed. "Elena, we didn't realize how much this meant to you. Maybe we made a mistake. Let's talk over dinner. Come home." Home. The word didn't land the way it used to. A week later, Callie sent a long email with subject line, "Let's rebuild." She blamed Victor, said Bryce had gone too far, that she never wanted things to turn out this way. She attached a photo of the 3 of us as kids, barefoot in the vines, holding juice-stained hands. I didn't respond. I didn't rage or explain or justify. I forwarded it to Noah, who glanced at it and then deleted it without a word. That was our new code: silence over spectacle. Bryce, unsurprisingly, took a different route. He gave an interview to a local blog claiming I had misrepresented my role at the family estate, that my bitterness was getting in the way of unity, that Ashgrove was a personal project that had blown out of proportion. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. A week later, a well-respected industry critic published a column titled, "The Woman the Wine World Ignored." It traced my story back through 10 years of overlooked labor, quoted anonymous former staff who said I was the real backbone of Vallis Lane. The piece ended with, "Perhaps the most refreshing thing about Ashgrove isn't the acidity, it's the authenticity." The next morning, Wine and Earth Quarterly requested a full feature. I agreed on one condition: that the article focus on the team, on what we built, not what I escaped. That was the clearest line I could draw. Not running away from betrayal, but running towards something better. The family didn't take it well. I received one last message, this time from Victor. "If you continue positioning yourself this way, you may force us into legal action. Please reconsider." I didn't. I blocked the number. Then I posted a photo: our Vineyard team under the Ashgrove sign, holding flutes of sparkling Syrah under golden evening light. The caption was one word: grown. No press release, no speech. Just that. I didn't burn bridges. They simply rotted from one side. And I didn't need to shout. Some truths echo louder in silence. This story reminds us that the deepest betrayals often come not from enemies, but from those we once called home. Elena's journey reveals a brutal but universal truth. Sometimes the ones who benefited most from our loyalty are the first to erase us when they no longer see value in our presence. She gave everything: time, labor, trust, to a family vineyard that quietly edited her out of the legacy she helped create. And yet, her response wasn't a dramatic breakdown or vengeful eruption. It was calm redirection, strategic silence. And in that, she modeled something powerful. Revenge doesn't always wear rage, it can wear resilience. In modern life, many of us grapple with similar patterns. Family members who guilt us into sacrificing more than we should. Workplaces that praise loyalty but reward manipulation. Or relationships that quietly shift into transactions. Elena's choice to build something of her own, to not go back and explain herself endlessly, teaches us that sometimes the most powerful closure is creating a life where those who hurt you no longer have access. She didn't need to prove her worth to those who had already decided to overlook it. Instead, she built new roots and thrived. That's not bitterness. That's liberation. And while Elena's family didn't suffer some public downfall, they did lose something far more piercing than status or applause: her presence, her labor, her trust. The people who used her as a tool could no longer touch what she had created. That quiet severance, that final photo captioned "grown," wasn't just poetic. It was accountability without confrontation. And that's a form of justice we rarely see in revenge stories. Elegant, earned, and echoing long after the last glass is poured. How to get started today. Audit your energy. List the people or roles in your life that feel like emotional drains versus mutual support. Set one silent boundary. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Just don't reply to that manipulative text. Let it sit. Start your ash grove. Begin researching or drafting a personal goal that exists outside of the approval of others. Capture one photo for yourself. A quiet moment of joy, progress, or peace. Don't post it, just keep it. It's for you. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved in order to protect your peace? Would you have chosen confrontation or silence? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this message resonated with you. More true-to-heart stories every week.